America Meditating Radio Show, we collect wisdom, inspire each other, and empower hearts 24/7. Hi, I'm Sister-Jenna. Join me and guest on Blog Talk Radio as we amplify stories that compel us to be more for ourselves and everyone else around us.
The entire world what?
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And humanity saw that the sky was not the limit. Achievement. Pass it on from the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor?
Hi, neighbor.
Mr. Rogers passed along friendship, hoping we would too. Friendship. Pass it on from the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
In this meditation, I invite you to become aware of the two types of consciousness that reside within the soul. Let us choose the consciousness of light over the darkness of past stories, the history that gets into our way. Let us now remember our connection to the Supreme Energy, the Supreme Soul, the being of light. For far too long, we have allowed the external forces to dictate our inner force. And at this time, I choose to get off the grid and step inside the heart, to be myself. I choose to no longer be under the influence of what the world tells me, what my parents have told me, my spouse, friends, or anyone who has been a negative influence in my life. In this meditation, I stand strong in the original, eternal, imperishable worth of the soul. I, the being of light, the soul of power, I step into the heart, and I become a being of love, a being of light and goodness.
Where do I go with all these feelings and all these faces?
gentle hand, it reaches out to take my hold. And how should I feel when tears of joy, they just won't stay inside these eyes? And what will I do when I start to love you and really trust and know you're there? You say you'll be in the light where I am. You'll be in the light where I am. Come on now, come into the light. You'll be in the light where I am. You'll be in the light where I am. Come on now, come into the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to America Meditating Radio. I'm your host, Sister Jenna, and we're enjoying the beautiful just space and atmosphere as we enjoy this season that we always call winter on the East Coast. So we're looking forward to just enjoying the crispness of the air and the love in the air and the sense of coming together more and spending quality time with each other. I find that to be of a highlight for me as I continue with my journey. I hope the show finds you well and in a good place, 24/7 on the Pause for Peace app or on Blog Talk Radio, on Stitcher, TuneIn, in whatever area you wish to tune into, hearing some of our provocative and mind-raising conversations. I really heartfully invite you to do so. We will always have a choice to make what we choose to bring in our framing of consciousness, and I sure hope that the America Meditating Radio is one of those things that you wish to amplify your worth and your sense of self in our world today. Stay tuned. We're going to have amy-hatkoff, a return friend, onto the show. She's going to be talking to us about the inner world of farm animals and much more. So just for a moment, we will allow ourselves to take a moment of silence, and I'm asking you to turn inwards to simply be a bestower of good wishes to every single member of our global family, including animals, valuing their presence and their contribution to our world. And in this moment of silence, we will bring on Sister Gita, who will read one of her beautiful poems and take us to a beautiful place inside.
Good day to us all. That includes me. Oftentimes in life, we don't include ourselves when it comes on to giving good wishes and pure feelings. So from the book, Just a Moment, the beauty in helping out. How important is it to cooperate with others? Examining the state of the world, it can be seen that cooperation is a word widely used but not so widely practiced. There are reasons for this. One of them is uncertainty about my own position or role. What is my role in this life? Because I do not have firm faith in myself, I develop a possessive attitude towards whatever I do. And not only do I avoid cooperating with others, but I do not allow anyone else to cooperate with me, just in case that person becomes too clever and is able to do a better job. Sometimes I avoid lending a hand quite simply because I'm not able to work in harmony with others. It seems strange that human beings, children of one God, should find difficulty in working with each other. What is this all about? When I come to know myself, my capabilities, my limitations, and my role, there is then no problem about finding harmony with those around me. For I understand that if something needs to be done properly, I should use the best hands available. It has been said, no man is an island. Om Shanti, such deep words. And I am going to think about it because it applies to me. Om Shanti.
That one applies to all of us, Sister Gita. That was mind-altering. Hey, the America Meditating Radio is really happy to welcome amy-hatkoff, who is an author, advocate, teacher, and filmmaker. Now, Amy has spent much of her career raising awareness of the needs of children and families in America and has collaborated with New Screen Concepts to produce Rob Reiner's The First Years Last Forever, a home video that addresses how parents and caregivers can foster children's emotional, social, and cognitive development. She co-produced Neglect Not the Children, an award-winning documentary that draws attention to the needs and realities of children at risk in our very own country. Amy has authored several books, including You Are My World, How a Parent's Love Shapes a Baby's Mind, and The Inner World of Farm Animals. Their amazing social, emotional, and intellectual capacities. Articles about Amy and her work have appeared in numerous newspapers and magazines. She's written articles about parents, children for several publications around the globe. Now, Amy joins us today to discuss her book on the inner world of farm animals, which brings their surprising intelligence, emotions, and social nature to life and makes a plea for treating them with compassion and respect. And you have my vote, Amy, and I'm totally with you on that one.
Hi there, Sister Jenna.
How are you?
Good to hear your voice again. I'm well, thank you. Thank you.
Same here. It sounds like you have a little bug.
You know, I think it's my raspy voice before noon. My voice doesn't wake up till later or something. I don't know. It's the first time I'm speaking this morning. I didn't realize I sounded so raspy.
Well, they call it in the world, you sound very, what's the word? Sexy, alluring, soft.
Okay.
Sensual is what they say. So that's fine.
Okay.
Amy, I'm so glad that you could join us today. We have a little Havanese here who is a domesticated pup. And a lot of people keep saying, I really don't train her. And I go, but she's an animal. Let her be free. I just need to tell her on a soul level that certain things are not good and certain things are good. And I find myself emerging where you start to feel like you have to control these animals. And for some reason, Amy, it doesn't feel right to me, for me. Maybe it's just my personality. So today I took her out, and there's snow everywhere. That dog ran around these 2 acres like she was free at last, free at last.
Right,
and I love seeing that. I just loved seeing that.
I think, I totally believe in what you're saying and understand that perception. And I think that everything is kind of, the ability to relate to the essence of the other. And in doing that, I think that's where learning evolves as well. They've shown that mothers who have very strong relationships with their babies, very strong attachments, they can just communicate just by looking at that child because there's such a connection. So I'm right there with you. I'm not into the heavy training myself.
And it's like a soul connection, and I can only imagine that farm animals are even more in tune with the highest level of intelligence. Tell us a little bit about this book that you've gotten, The Inner World of Farm Animals, and how did you come to write about that?
Well, sort of. It evolved from kind of the same kind of thing you're saying. I was riding a bus. I knew nothing at the time about, the capacities of farm animals. That my life's work really had been about children. And I was on a bus in New York City, and I saw a sign of this cow who seemed to be, in a farm factory. A factory farm. And I saw in that cow's eyes her soul or her essence, and a bell went off in my head very loudly saying, you have to write about who these farm animals really are and give them a voice. And it was a very powerful experience, and honestly, it was nothing I knew anything about, and I just let the idea sort of recede to the back, but it kept knocking at the door. And when I finished something that I was working on about children, actually 6 months later, because I kept having this prompting, I sat down at the computer and tried to really, find the facts behind the feeling that I was having, that there was so much more to these animals. And I Googled, cows and intelligence and pigs and feelings and, chickens and emotions. And to my great surprise, there was a tremendous body of knowledge out there, people who around the globe who were doing research on the capacities of farm animals and documenting it. And they were also looking into the sentience of farm animals. And I was able to uncover a conference in London, which was called The Sentience of Farm Animals, from Darwin's to Dawkins. And they had just gathered the greatest minds who were really addressing who farm animals really are. And it's funny, sentience is a word that, I've done a lot of yoga, and we always used it. Of course, we were all sentient beings. And that word was something that many of my extremely intelligent friends would say to me, what is sentience? And, I think it's much more common now, but animals, farm animals, are fully aware of how they feel, what's going on around them. They're completely present and aware in ways that I don't think most of us are aware of. And so that was sort of my goal of this book. Yeah.
So tell us, Amy, what is it that they actually know that I can understand or come to realize that can make me a better person? Was the research able to help you explore the fact that we can learn so much about the better part of our humanity?
Completely. I mean, going back to Darwin.
Oh, please tell me more. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Starting, with Darwin in the 1700s, he, espoused that the difference was not in kind between ourselves and these animals, but it was actually just degree. We shared the same emotions. Farm animals, I'm going to focus on farm animals, obviously, but, they have sadness, depression, boredom, joy, anxiety. They are connected to one another. Their attachment, the maternal attachment to the offspring, is profound, and that's actually where we've learned everything we know about human babies and the attachment to the mother and father. The title, Sister-Jenna, for the book originally, based on all the research I was finding, I wanted to call the book Closer Than We Think, because there is truly tremendous similarities. So, they from their emotional lives, where they're stressed if they're separated from their families or their siblings, they have, just great. They're complex intelligence. They're capable of higher thinking. They can solve problems. They can think about their past. They're aware of the future. They have intentions. They have memory, complex language. There's a quote from Bernard Beers, who ran the neuroscience department in San Diego. I have it in my head. It's after 7 decades of cumulative research, we have found no fundamental difference in the consciousness of humans and the higher animals. So, Jane Goodall, who very fortunately did the foreword, begins the book with a quote, "We have to realize we are not the only beings on this planet with personalities and minds." So this book was such an eye-opener to me. The research really is very profound and very convincing, from the science to the individual stories and experiences I had with the animals. I think the hope was it would change the way we think and act towards them.
I'm sure it does. Now, in the book, you don't talk about factory farms and the hard-to-hear stories about the animals and how they're treated. Why did you decide not to touch on that particular area? Because I would wonder, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? Because that vibration has got to be all around them. And I'll say this, not that I have any proof, but on the mystical and spiritual level, why I chose to be vegetarian. I'm half Jamaican, half Indian, so the Indian side is completely vegetarian and the Jamaican side is nowhere near that. And so when I grew up, I grew up with a choice, and then I was eating meat. But then in my 20s,
was just called to save a soul. And here I am 25 years later, I have not touched meat at all. At all. And then I started to think about when I started to go to the supermarket, Amy, and I would be by the fruit and vegetable section, how calm and soothing and natural that felt. And this was only after I became a vegetarian, though. And when I would walk by the meat section, I was like, oh my goodness. I used to put that in my body. I feel so much love for you souls. I am so sorry that I used to do that to you. And it's just a completely different vibe. Any thoughts in that area?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I remember my macrobiotic teacher, Misho Kushi, it was the first time I heard somebody say that your vibration changes when you're not eating meat. And that also when you are eating meat, we're kind of ingesting all the fear and pain that the animals had at the time of their death. And I think that there's a great connection in a way, with people who are doing yoga and meditating and are vegetarian or vegans. I think the vibration changes. And I've had the same experience as you. It's very hard for me to even walk down the meat aisle, and I do the same thing. I just apologize to the animals. And but going back to your original question, why I didn't talk about factory farming, and I felt guilty about it, and I had a conversation with one of my favorite animal advocates, Gene Bauer, and he said, Amy, there is a lot out there about that. There is not very much on what you're trying to do, and what I was trying to do is raise awareness, shed a new light, make the invisible visible, and bring to mind why we should care about what happens to these animals. And in doing that, hope to, further our compassionate treatment of them. Yeah, the point was really to make known and to celebrate who they are. And you mentioned, it was very interesting, or the woman reading the poem, there's so many gifts that we can gain from seeing our, co-dwellers, as having things to offer. We're so involved with dominating our environment.
Right, Yeah. That's just our ego,
what did you say?
The ego. Well, the ego wants to dominate, and when we are in self-respect and soul awareness, we want to cooperate.
Exactly, and I think that's the essence here, as we've become more aware of the animals, and hopefully change how we move forward with them.
Now, do you feel that we've made progress in terms of how we treat the farm animals, and what is your hope in terms of moving forward in that area as we talked about? Because, are we getting better right now? Are we better than the statistics were like 5-10 years ago?
Well, we have a lot farther to go. I think in terms of awareness and the beginning of institution of protection of farm animals, and I think things have changed dramatically. When I talked to my publisher about this book, it was 9 years ago, and they didn't know that they could sell a book about farm animals. And I took a cut in my advance, and we took kind of a risk on this book. Today, it is an incredibly hot topic, and people are passionate about farm animals and protecting them. And I don't know, I cannot tell you the number of videos that I receive on my Facebook page, showing who the animals are, and both the the very hard to look at videos, but also the incredible melt your heart videos. So I think that the advocacy for farm animals has escalated. The reality is still a huge challenge.
Well, thank you for this work, Amy. I think it's just so priceless and so timely. I think we're at a very interesting time. I don't think I'd have ever said that 10 years ago. There is something in the air that all that which is not governed by divinity and light and beauty is getting surfaced for us to see very clearly. Is that where you still want to keep going? And it's challenging those of us who might have felt that holding on to very darker elements of existence, that our simplicity or purity of consciousness has to rise up from within us and say, I guess what I've been doing wasn't really serving the greater cause. And it's just a very powerful time, and I'm just so glad that you were doing that. And I, Amy, would have never, ever thought I would have ever turned vegetarian. Just to give you an FYI. And so I think anyone can kind of even reduce their intake of meat, if not to completely go vegetarian. I just think there's so much there to experience and to value along the way.
And right, and today, I think that the research towards vegetarianism and plant-based diet has been very strong, even though, the field of nutrition is so conflicted and you can have so many different reports.
So, Amy, I would love if you could tell us a little bit about some of the animals like pigs and goats, and what are some of the things that might surprise someone like me if I were to see an animal or a goat doing something that would make me think, wow, they're really, really super intelligent.
Well, I think one of the things that surprised me the most was to learn, for example, that pigs can learn to play video games on the computer, and they use their snout to move the stick, and they actually have a hit rate of 80%. And I think this piece of information, is pretty much a game changer in the way we think about, any farm animal using a computer, for example. They also, on a factory farm, they are tagged, and in terms of how they get their feeding lots, and the pigs are smart enough to pick up any of the tags that have fallen off another pig and run through the counter with that. Another thing that surprised me, cows, for example, get excited when they solve a problem. And when the cows who were taught to unlatch a gate to get to the food, when they were able to do that, all their physiological signs were elevated, and the scientists even observed them like kicking up their heels, whereas the cows who just went through the gate to get the food, there were no changes. So that was the scientific evidence that it had a positive impact on them. And chickens are phenomenally intelligent. They have a very complex language. They can use geometric principles, and one Italian researcher found they could actually even count when they were doing an experiment with different bowls. And baby chicks who watch videos, hens eating only out of the red bowl, not the yellow bowl, those baby chicks can learn from watching that video, and they eat only from the red bowl. So I could tell you a million stories like this. And I can tell you one thing. We were talking before about the consciousness about the animals. I was once sitting out with a goat in a field, and I had this extraordinary sense of calm. And I thought to myself, boy, if anything ever happened to me, I'd want to be around this goat. And I was telling a friend of mine about this, and there was a lot of research. Actually, they used to call George Stephanopoulos Clinton's goat, because goats throughout history, have been put in with racehorses to keep them calm the night before a race. And they used to have George Stephanopoulos keep Clinton calm. I could go on and on about these dimensions of these animals that we never even think about. So I would just leave it with that. Leave it with keeping our eyes open, reading the book, finding out. I mean, there's really no difference at all in their capacities between dogs and cats. And as I said at the beginning,
mind-boggling.
There's just no difference. And pigs in certain areas are much smarter than a dog, and vice versa, not to compare, but they all have their areas of strength and intelligence.
Wow, that's incredible to hear. You have filled this conversation with a lot of richness and value, especially for our little four-legged friends, which I know that the more we come to understand how close they are to us, and I have to tell you a very sad story, which I'm hoping will change at some point. We live on a property that only has 4 houses down that whole lane. And at the end is a family that runs a very huge courier service that everybody in the world knows about. Okay. And they live on a property with 100 acres, which they donated to the state. They donated 75 acres of their 100 acres. And as a result of all the property, they want to keep it for natural wildlife, and they don't want the developers to come in and build on the property, so they decided to contribute it and create a stipulation for 100 years that it stays a natural wildlife. Mm-hmm. But here the irony to the story: they hire shooters to kill the deers because they've multiplied so much. And when I look at these, I won't call them contradictions, but I'd call them complexities of our hierarchy of values. It really turns us to a place of what are we supposed to do? How do we really respond to life? Because a lot of people are still thinking that they need animals to survive, one. Or secondly, that they're just frustrated or they were abused as children, and so they start to abuse animals and not thinking that there's something there to learn. And I think what I've taken from your conversation is basically things with souls, like dolphins, for example, are so wise. And if we're humble enough to listen, we just might learn more about how elevated we are.
I think also the animals are amazing mirrors for the growth that we need to do. If we look at, what was it, Gandhi, who said the greatness of a nation can be determined by its moral treatment of its animals. And I think that is also another, we have to look at how we are treating them and hopefully, learn from that in the areas that we need desperately to improve.
Very true, very true.
Mm-hmm.
Amy-Hatkoff, thank you so much for joining us on the air today and for the work that you're doing. And tell us where we can find information about your book and any events that you might have coming up as well.
Okay, well, I think the best place at the moment, because we're still having website problems, is, first of all, you can read about the book on Amazon, and you can see some of the reviews there, and you can also tune into my Facebook page, but you can Google The Inner World of Farm Animals, Amy Hatkoff, and you'll see interviews and far more information. And my quote, do you need my quote of my favorite
Please
quote?
Do. Mm-hmm.
It is actually Namaste. And the divine in me salutes the divine in you. And I'm actually writing a book on that right now. I've finished it and just got it off to my agent. But I think that is probably one of the most powerful phrases, and that could apply beautifully here. As we can see the divine part of us can recognize the divinity in animals, the world would be very different.
Amy Hatkoff, namaste.
Namaste, Sister Jenna. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Imagine what we can learn from our friends with four legs, my friends. Please don't underestimate their contribution to our humanity and our ecological system. Hope you've enjoyed our chit-chat with Amy Hatkoff. Do go to get a copy of her book, The Inner World of Farm Animals. Thank you for joining us, and please follow the conversation and the story. I'm going to stop using follow. I would love for us to remain engaged in building our relationship on what we call today social media, or just another extension of our stories with each other. So on Twitter and Facebook, just go to America Meditating. Thank you for your support, your love, and your care. I'm going to end today's conversation with keep the faith. Take care, everyone, and remember, no one can take away your happiness unless you give them permission. We are here to love each other the same, and if you're planning at all to change the world, change yourself.
Everybody say